What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about the Great Patreon Purge. Now before we get into the main topic of the video, I have to say thank you. This channel is up over 5,000 subscribers in the last 7 days. That means a third or close to a third of my subscription base is here in the last week. I'm genuinely stunned by the level of growth recently, and I don't know what to say other than thank you, both to my long-term subscribers who have been here for 2 years and my new subscribers that have joined the last week. I'm gonna continue doing what I'm doing, but I do appreciate this, and I hope that I can continue to improve and keep you guys on board. So once again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. It does mean a lot to me. Now let's get into the topic. In the name of full disclosure, I want to make a quick point. Last month, I was invited to speak at a conference. Also speaking at the conference were Andrew Torba, Robert Spencer, and Milo Yiannopoulos. During the course of this video, I will be mentioning these three people. I don't have a real relationship with any of them. In fact, the only two I actually had a real conversation with were Robert Spencer and Andrew Torba. He convinced me to sign up to Gab, by the way. Gab.com/IamSean90 if you want to follow me there. But because I respect you guys, I want to mention these people up front because I did meet them, and you can argue it's a conflict of interest, even though my contact with the aforementioned people was incredibly brief. Last week, Milo Yiannopoulos and YouTubers Sargon of Akkad and James Olsip were all banned from Patreon. Now, this is the part of the video where I have to state the obvious, which is I don't agree with all three of these content creators on everything. Now, I really hate saying that because I feel like I'm insulting your intelligence when I do. It's obvious. I've said it a million times in the past. No two people agree on anything, and it's literally impossible to agree with any of these three content creators on everything because they are completely different people and they advocate for different positions. There are major differences with them, but since the left and the mainstream media just blanket label all three of these content creators as members of the alt-right, even though only one of them really fits that label, I have to say that because that's where we are in this country. Now, with all that being said, we're going to focus primarily on Sargon of Akkad's case because he actually has the best argument against his Patreon ban, and here's why. When Lawrence Southern was banned from Patreon, the backlash to that was pretty significant. It seemed pretty obvious that Lawrence Southern's ban was indicative of Patreon moving towards viewpoint discrimination, and the backlash was so enormous that Jack Conte, who is the CEO of Patreon, actually put out a video explaining, no, it's not viewpoint discrimination. What's actually happening here is we're operating on a very specific standard, and that standard was called manifest observable behavior.
Hi everyone, so I want to do something a little unusual and make a video outlining Patreon's reasoning for taking down a creator's page. I found that tech companies are usually pretty disengaged from their communities when it comes to content policy and discussing takedowns. I've always wished that tech companies would just tell folks what the heck is going on, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. So to recap, Patreon recently took down the pages of all the members of Defend Europe, including Lawrence Southern's page, and we also took down the IGD news page as well. Some people are really upset about this. Some people have even accused Patreon of making decisions based on political ideology, so I'd like to clear all that up right now. Content policy and the decision to remove a creator page has absolutely nothing to do with politics and ideology, and has everything to do with a concept called manifest observable behavior.
And he made a clear, unequivocal statement that the reason why Lawrence Southern was being banned was not due to her political views.
From a high level, we removed their pages because they directly obstructed a search and rescue ship in the Mediterranean, and they made a variety of statements and outlined plans to obstruct similar rescue ships in the future. And that's a violation of a section of our content policy that prohibits creators from threatening to take or from taking action that could lead to harm or loss of life.
But it was due to the fact that Lawrence Southern was supporting and engaging with an organization that would go out on ships and block migrants from reaching Europe. Jack said at the time that the issue that Patreon had with that had nothing to do with immigration in Europe, and it was solely based on the fact that the organization that Lawrence Southern was working with could cause people to die, because if you block off an NGO vessel and they can't save migrants whose rafts might fail, then those migrants could potentially drown. And therefore, according to Jack Conte, Patreon could not continue to facilitate financial support for that manifest observable behavior.
The purpose of using manifest observable behavior is to remove personal values and beliefs when the team is reviewing content. It's a review method that's entirely based on observable facts. What has a camera seen? What has an audio device recorded? It doesn't matter what your intentions are, your motivations, who you are, your identity, your ideology. The trust and safety team only looks at manifest observable behavior.
Now at the time I thought that was nonsense. I'm sure many of you thought that Jack Conte was just trying to disguise what was viewpoint discrimination under the guise of manifest observable action, but at that moment, Patreon said unequivocally that they don't engage in viewpoint discrimination, and they put forward a solid standard for how to judge future bans. Now, using that standard, you can make the case that Allsup's ban fits the definition of manifest observable behavior. I don't necessarily agree with that. To me, it's not a coincidence that his ban immediately followed up the conviction of the guy who killed Heather Heyer with this car. That happened at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. James Allsup was a supporter of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. Now, I personally don't think it's fair to hold one participant in a rally responsible for the actions of another participant in the rally. And obviously, if you applied that standard evenly, a lot of left-wingers would be kicked off of Patreon because of their support for Antifa and their support for rallies where Antifa shows up and commits violence.
In regards to anti-fascists, they're harder to pin down because they're not an organization with leaders like Black Lives Matter. But I will say this, violence against fascists is not the same as violence used by fascists. Anti-fascism is not fascism. The thing is, we can all agree that not all violence is equal. In the face of large-scale societal violence, fighting fascism is self-defense.
But Patreon can argue that that meets the threshold of the standard that they previously laid out. Milo was banned after one day, and the given explanation was his association with the Proud Boys. In the future, I'll probably do a video about the incident in New York City with the Proud Boys, about how the media is smearing them, even though they are clearly a response to the violence committed and initiated by Antifa. But again, since the Proud Boys are being smeared throughout the mainstream media, Patreon can make an incredibly weak case that Milo's association with the Proud Boys could possibly meet the standard of manifest observable behavior.
Manifest observable behavior.
Even though I would unequivocally disagree with that. But what makes Sargon of Akkad's ban so unique is that there's no way you can stretch the definition of manifest observable behavior to fit the reason that he got banned. And Patreon itself isn't even trying. They're saying that the reason that Sargon of Akkad had to be banned from Patreon is because while on a stream on another person's channel, he used the N-word against neo-Nazis who were spamming the chat with racial epithets and personal insults against Carl. Now, Sargon has done a lot of videos explaining this in great detail. I recommend you watch them. But the long and short of it is that Patreon has just admitted that manifest observable behavior was kind of a nonsense point to get out of the Lawrence Southern thing, and the reason they're going after him is because of hate speech.
Which is what they are employing when they say, because of this, your use of racial and homophobic slurs taking place on somebody else's YouTube video factored into our decision to remove your page. I'm confident enough that the very clip itself demonstrated that I'm not attacking non-white people or gays, and I am so confident of that I included it in my previous video. There is a demonstrable context that disproves this allegation, but the Trust and Safety team are simply ignoring that, which makes their final statement all the more worrisome. To begin the appeal process, please respond with any evidence you feel helps explain why the language you used in conversation with Michelle Caitlin doesn't constitute hate speech. This is insane. What evidence could I prove of my own intent?
So now Patreon is openly engaged in viewpoint discrimination. Now this should be no surprise to anyone. Big tech companies are doing this more and more every single day. A few months back, Robert Spencer was removed from Patreon, and Patreon claimed the reason for that removal was because MasterCard was putting pressure on them to do so. In response to the Sargon ban, Gab, which is an alternative platform to Twitter, started a Patreon page, and they were banned in 1 hour. So Patreon has clearly been captured by the left, and they are operating as agents of the left. Now, in response to this, a lot of people who donate money through Patreon have decided to close their accounts. I 100% support people doing this. I know it hurts other creators that are also on Patreon, but honestly, this is one of those situations where the bigger issue matters. For those of you interested in supporting Sargon, he has set up an account with Subscribestar. I have also set up an account with Subscribestar for people who want to withdraw their support from Patreon and move it over there. I offer the same reward tiers, and I will continue to do so until, of course, the day comes when they come for Subscribestar. Oh, and quick update, the payment processor PayPal has severed their connection with Subscribestar, so they're already coming for it. But I'm there until that ship goes down too. And when Andrew Torbo, the CEO of Gab, announces his Patreon alternative, I'll be on that too. Those are my thoughts on the Great Patreon Purge. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on Twitter and Gab at IamSean90, and support me on PayPal, and support me on Subscribestar at subscribestar.com/Sean Fitzgerald. This has been me talking about the Great Patreon Purge. Till next time.